I want to share something with you that God put in my heart years and years ago. And I know that someone needs to hear this, so I need to go ahead and share it with you all. All right. So there's a difference between weather and climate. Now, as a kid, we're all taught that, in science class, the difference between weather and climate. But I want you to think about the difference between weather and climate when it comes to your life and the journey that you're on. And I'm going to give you some examples. I'm going to give some examples of this through the Bible. I'm also going to give examples of this in real life. The Bible is real life, but basically like within your life, okay? And we'll start first with something that most of us have probably done. You have probably flown, rode in an airplane before, okay? And you may have, at one point, while you were scheduled for a flight, noticed that you may have had inclement weather. In other words, maybe it was raining, maybe it was snowing, whatever it might be. And I want you to think about this. Let's say it was snowing, and let's say it was 1 p.m. on a random Wednesday, and you had to get from one point to the other. Maybe you're flying from the East Coast to the West Coast, or vice versa. And for some reason, it's snowing. When you boarded the flight and you witnessed all the snow on the ground, did it ever occur to you that you would have a difficult flight, right? Probably not. What happened during that flight? If you don't know, what happens is normally there's turbulence from the ground as the plane is ascending. As the plane breaks what we call I think it's the troposphere, right? So that first layer of atmosphere is called the troposphere. That's where we have our weather. So the moment that the plane breaks that troposphere, whether it was raining, whether it was snowing, whether it was hailstorms, right? Whatever it might have been on the tropic level of the atmosphere, when the plane breaks through that area, it's clear skies. In other words, you're now above this first layer of clouds. There's no weather there. If it's 1 p.m., it's sunny. Like if you look around, you actually look out the window when you're playing, it's sunny. What I want people to understand, and what God told me quite some time ago, years ago, is that do not allow your actual weather to define your climate. I'm gonna give you guys some examples or definitions first of the difference so that we can really get this ingrained. Weather is defined as the state of the atmosphere at a place and time in regards to heat, dryness, sunshine, wind, rain, etc. That is the dictionary definition of the word weather. The dictionary definition of the word climate is the weather conditions prevailing, that means take place over a long period of time, an extended period of time technically, in an area in general or over a long period. Now, climate is a long-term pattern of weather in a particular area. Weather can change hour by hour, weather can change day by day, even month by month or year to year. Weather can change hour by hour, day by day, month to month, even year to year. That is the definition of what weather is. Your climate is over a longer period of time. So think about this. Hour by hour, day by day, month by month, year by year. Those are all considered to be short terms. Your weather is something that is prevailing. So I would say your weather would be considered to be a decade of time. All right, not just a short period of time as far as 1 year. I would say that your weather is 10 years. Now, how does this apply to your life? Easy. You could be going through turbulent weather right now, but that turbulent weather does not have to define your actual climate as you as an individual. You can choose what your climate is. And let me say this too, for someone who may be in a very rough environment, rough weather, right? Having hailstorms, or maybe you live in a region, metaphorically, where you have nothing but ice and tundra. No matter where you're located, if you if you go to a higher atmosphere, it won't matter. In other words, you can always go higher. You can always raise your altitude or your atmosphere. And metaphorically, you can always raise your attitude. Your attitude raise your altitude. So even if you're physically in a bad environment, even if you're physically you're part of a situation that is not fair, or that it's not really to the best of your benefit, you still have the ability to raise your attitude. And by raising your attitude, that will allow you to raise your altitude. So another example of that, and we'll go into the Bible, is in the book of Genesis. I want to say you'll find this really from Genesis 37, chapter 37, all the way to chapter 50. In this time frame, we're looking at the life of Joshua. And if you don't know, Joshua was the firstborn child of Rachel, and he was one of 12 total brothers, okay? There was a time frame within his life, if I'm not mistaken, it was 22 years from when Joshua, the Bible shows that it was about 22 years from when Joshua was given a dream of him reaching a pinnacle of success, right? If you don't know the story, Joshua was given a dream, and he did not fully, he may have interpreted it or not, but he was given a dream and he told his brothers about the dream. And in this particular dream, it showed that there were these large bushels of wheat that his brothers brought bushels of wheat, and the wheat all bowed towards him. In other words, that his brothers were subject to him. Now, he's the youngest brother at this time, and they're super upset, and they were actually insulted by his dream. And what's pretty interesting about his dream in general is that not only did he have the dream, but Joshua chose on his own to basically broadcast his dream, which is kind of funny because as you're reading Genesis, you kind of get the feeling that, his brothers weren't always that fond of him. So I'm not really sure what made him want to share a dream. Like if you know that, and maybe he had no idea, I don't know. But if it seems like you have friends or family, and this might be true for someone out there, if it seems like you have friends or family who, from their actions or subconsciously, it seems like they really don't want the best for you, then it might not be in your best intention to share your innermost desires with them, or your innermost secrets with them, right? Or so I thought that was kind of weird that Joseph, my apology, that Joseph was so eager to share this intimate dream that God had gave him about his life to his brothers. Okay, now all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord. So the beauty with this is that it it still worked out in not just not just to Joseph's favor, but it also worked out in the benefit of his brothers, even though his brothers were the ones who did him wrong, right? So the way that what ends up happening is his brothers are so upset with him that they choose to cast him into a well, a pit, and at one point they consider it to essentially kill him. They eventually decide to sell him, which is a representation of what took place for Jesus. They sell him for 30 pieces of currency at that time frame. and either 20 or 30 pieces of currency. And he is then enslaved into Egypt. While he was in Egypt, he's sold on the open market as a slave. And Egypt itself in the Bible is not just it's not just about the physical location of Egypt. Egypt in the Bible also represents bondage in general. Period. Point blank. Period. Okay. And there's a lot of details within that. And the Bible gives so many details of that. I would even say that if we look on the back of a dollar bill, you see representation of Egypt by itself. I'm not going to get too deep into that, but you'll be able to find that all over, not just the Bible, but probably throughout the internet. So he sold to this house for this commander of guard at that time, who would have been like a head executioner, and a royal official in Egypt. His name was Potiphar. Okay, so I'm gonna pause it right there just to say this. It was 22 years from the time that Joseph was given the dream until it actually manifested. Within this 22-year span, it was 13 years of what many of us would consider to be hardship. Not only was it hardships, but it was very unfair, the things he went through. He was accused of things that he did not do. He was put into jail. And no matter where he was, what he chose to do, and this is the message that I believe is for someone, he chose to raise his altitude to increase his atmosphere by choosing to raise his attitude. And I'm going to read this for you real quick. All right, so let's go ahead and read this real quick. So we are right now in Genesis chapter 39, I'll start with verse 19. It says, when the master heard, and by master talking about Potiphar, so when Potiphar heard the story his wife told him, saying, this is how your slave treated me, he burned with anger. Joseph's master, Potiphar, took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. I'm gonna kind of stop right there for a second. So one, keep in mind, Potiphar is a head executioner, okay? And up until this point, Joseph, a slave, was doing so well at his job. So first off, Joseph was a free person. He became a slave from wrongdoing, not of his own. But then he chose to basically be the best that he could at his position. That's him choosing to raise his attitude and his altitude. So much so that Potiphar put all of his possessions of management into the hand of Joseph. Okay. Fast forward, Joseph is met with, again, being accused of something that he did not do, or et cetera, et cetera. So now we're looking at Potiphar, right? Potiphar's wife was actually trying to seduce Joseph. He refused, and then she says that he tried to rape her. All right. So now what happens is Potiphar puts Joseph in the king or the Pharaoh's prison, which is interesting because Potiphar is the head executioner, meaning the person who executes the prisoners. Okay. So Potiphar has the ability to essentially kill Joseph. That's his job, right? But what's interesting about this is that one, he does not do that. I think because he knows that his wife was lying. But two, he doesn't put Joseph into the worst jail. Like, really think about this. He puts him in the jail for the king's subjects. Okay? So it's not the worst jail that one can be in. All right? Okay. Going on. It says, but while Joseph was in prison there, the Lord was with him. Right? So that right there is a bonus. The Lord is with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So now the person who's over the jail. Verse 22 says, so the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison. So here it is. Joseph was first a slave, and then he became the head manager over Potiphar's house. Now he's a prisoner, and now he becomes the head manager over this prison. Okay, I would call him a junior warden. And he was responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. Okay? In whatever he did. So now we're going to chapter 40. And I'm going to kind of scroll down just a little bit to verse 6. It says, when Joseph came to them the next morning. So at this point, there are two additional people being added to the jail, right? Joseph's the manager of said jail. And the people who have been added to the jail is a cupbearer and a baker, all for the king, all right? Something took place, and now they're in jail, all right? So when Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected, meaning that they were sorrowful. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with them in his master's house, why do you look so sad today? Now, let me just say this real quick, and you can kind of figure this out, but why wouldn't anyone be sad in jail? Joseph, right? What that lets you know is that Joseph's mindset was a joyful expectation of good. In the Bible, it says to keep hope. And this hope in the Greek, it translates in English, is defined as joyful expectation of good. When we're keeping our joyful expectation of good, that's a way that we can actually increase our altitude, all right? Keep in mind, the higher our altitude, the better our attitude, the higher the atmosphere that we're able to be within. And as you continue to read this chapter in Genesis, you'll find out that Joseph used his gift that was mentioned when he was a child of interpreting dreams. He uses that gift while he was in prison. And if you think about it, the gift, the talent, the ability that basically put him in a pit himself when he was younger is now the same tool, gift, ability, and talent that he's using to raise someone else out of a pit. A lot of times what we'll try to do is, if we know that we're good at something, I'll just talk about the business owners that I've helped many times. A business owner might be good at making a watch, right? They value that. They're known to be a good watchmaker within their family, okay? But no one else knows about it. And they're unwilling to make watches for free. They're unwilling to make watches for free, okay? But no one knows about them, by the way. So what they'll do is they will hoard or hide. They'll hide, essentially, their gift in hopes that they're not going to utilize their gift until someone's willing to pay them more for it. Okay? Let me give another example. It might be easier. You're working at a job right now, and you want your employer to pay you more money. You believe that you are worth more money. You believe that what you offer, what you value, that you're worth more money. Period. Point blank, period. What if I told you that the best way to be promoted is to use your gifts and talents that you're currently being undervalued at right now to benefit others? And what happens is when we do that, people then begin to see the value of said thing. They then will promote, advertise, spread good news about said thing. Here's another example. Social media, the reason social media is beneficial for business owners is because it gives business owners the opportunity to share or to give samples or trials of what they have to offer for free to people. But you and I both know that there are many business owners who will make the excuse and say that they don't have the time to do that. They don't want to share. They don't want to give away their secrets. They don't want to help people for free. They don't want to give out so many free consultations, on and on and on and on, right? There's a Bible verse in Proverbs that says that there are those who scatter abroad. Let me give you the actual verse real quick. Okay. All right. Proverbs chapter 11, verses 24 through 26. It says, "Some give freely, yet grow all the richer. Others withhold what is due and only suffer want. A prosperous person," this is verse 25, a generous person will be enriched, and one who gives water will get water." Right? So if I give, you get. Verse 26 says, "The people curse those who hold back grain, but a blessing is on the head of those who sell it." Okay? What is it talking about? What is that verse talking about? Pretty simple. Now put it into how this can relate to business owners. If you're willing to give something for free and allow people to experience something for free, it then will allow them to place a value on it. When they place that value on something, that is called the exchange, or that's called, if we're talking about economics, that's where supply meets demand, and that little exchange right there, little middle, that X point right there in the middle, that's the price. That means if I offer you this book and I say, "Hey, I made this book, it's on Amazon, I want to give it to you free." All I ask is that you tell me what you think about it and if you found it valuable, and maybe tell me, hey, if I were to sell this book here, what would you buy it for? I give this to you for free. You actually use it, you find value in it, and you say, "You know what, Leland, I would actually say that this book is worth $20. Oh, cool, right? So now if I promote, sell this book to other people for $20, it's mutually beneficial because people have said, "Hey, it's more than worth $20 bucks." That's what that verse is saying right there. But you first have to be willing to actually give. And a lot of times you're going to end up giving for free. So if you want to be promoted, you're best off showing your value. Okay? And you can only show your value by giving it. We can't sit back and say, "Okay, give me." It doesn't work like that. We would have to show the value. Okay? All right. So what ends up happening, going back to Joseph, is that he interprets this dream for both individuals, and he says to them, "Listen, I have just given this to you, and all that I asked is when you are restored back to your position." It's talking about the cupbearer. When you're restored back to your position, that you will spread the good news, promote, give me referrals of the things that I've done. Okay? What happened is the cupbearer was restored back to his original position, his original job, and things got good, and he forgot about Joseph. And you know what? People do that a lot. You may have helped people. I know I have helped people, and people will say to you, "Hey man, if you help me get this goal, if you help me do X, Y, and Z, man, I'll look out for you on the other side." Essentially, that's what they're saying. And you know what? That rarely happens. Just like the cupbearer, people, once they get to the other side, they will forget about you. I believe during this time frame that Joseph was forgotten about again in his life. I think that during this time frame that Joseph was still diligent, and that everything that he did was blessed by God, even during this time frame of being forgotten. And I think that even that time frame of him being forgotten by the cupbearer, I don't think he ever held it against the cupbearer. I don't think so. I don't think that made him bitter at all. I want to say that had Joseph been bitter, he would have probably been more bitter at the fact that his own brothers contemplated killing him, and that his own brothers actually sold him into slavery. If there was anything to be bitter about, it would have been that. Or better yet, if there was anything to be bitter about, maybe it would have been about a married woman who attempted to seduce him, who then claimed that he tried to take advantage of her. But I don't think he was bitter about any of those situations at all. I think he willingly forgave all those situations, and maybe even situations that we don't even know about. I think he willingly forgave those because he was able to perform being a junior warden of a prison. He was able to perform being a steward or manager of someone's estate. He was willing to perform at a top level. You can't perform at a top level and for God's hand to be on you if you're full of malice, if you're full of hate. Not for God's hand to be on you. You can have somebody else's hand on you, I guess, but not for God's hand to be on you. So I don't think that there was any malintentions, even towards the cupbearer. What does end up happening is the Pharaoh, the king at that time, ends up having a dream, and none of his wise advisors or counsels can interpret said dream. So what he ends up doing is asking other people who work at the palace, hey, who can help me with this dream? And at that moment, the cupbearer says, oh my goodness. Years ago, I think it was like 3 years ago, when you had put me in jail, King so-and-so or Pharaoh so-and-so, there was this prisoner who interpreted my dream. His name is Joseph. And it was at that moment that Joseph was put in front of the king. And that same gift that had put him in a pit early on, that same gift that had him sitting in a jail cell or sitting in a jail, now became the same gift that elevated him to be in front of a king. Proverbs has this verse that says, let me give you guys this verse real quick so that you can use it for yourself. It says that your gift shall make room for you. And it's a lot more deeper than that, but it's Proverbs chapter 18, verse 16. It says, a man's gift maketh room for him, and it brings him before great men. There's also an additional verse in Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 29 says, do you see a man skillful and experienced in his work? He will stand in honor before kings. He will not stand before obscure men. I'm going to read another, and so that was out of the Amplified version. I'm going to read Amplified Classic, AMPC. So it says, do you see a man diligent and skillful in his business? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men. There's a key here in this word of diligent and skillful. diligent and skillful. Diligent and skillful. And I know we're getting late on this video, but I think when we think of the word diligent, I don't even know what people think nowadays, but I believe when most people think of diligent, they're thinking of constantly hitting something over and over and over, right? And there's a little bit of truth to that of diligence, but there's a Hebrew definition for the word diligent. Remember, because the Old Testament was written in Hebrew. And what diligent, there's an interpretation of diligence, which is it's basically like a branch of wisdom or skill, because they use diligence and skill together often. And it might be the word skill then. So with skill, it's not, it's like a, it's a, let me just give you the Hebrew word for skill. Skill is it's more of an intimate word. All right, it says the Hebrew word skill is similar to the English word for wisdom. The Bible uses several Hebrew words to describe skill, including Yadha, Ben, Sakhal, Lamada, Shakam, Chavash, Yat. So I may have pronounced those poorly, but those are the words. But the skill is like an intimate thing. Let me see here. If you have ever played an instrument, if you have ever played a sport, maybe while you're playing a sport, you're practicing. Maybe if you ever did any type of like physical activity in which you chose to truly be present and to focus, you would have found yourself in somewhat of a zone of doing that activity. Or sometimes when you're working, and let's say you're doing something that you enjoy doing for work, or maybe you're drawing, or maybe you are a painter, something that typically would allow you to engulf yourself in the activity. And you'll notice that it almost seems as though time flies by. For some people, that's sports. For others, it could be reading. For some people, it could be some type of creative activity. Anyway, that thing is called, we interpret that as being in the flow, or being in a zone, or your zone of genius. Or I've heard people interpret it or define it as, your special place. Okay, that is that skill. That is what Robert Greene says in his book as mastery. But mastery does not take place haphazardly. It takes place solely by you choosing to fully be invested, meaning that there's at some point there's an intimate relationship with that subject matter, or that thing, or that product, or that service, where you enjoy it so much. It's not, so anyway, long story short, that thing is what puts you in front of others. That thing is what puts your greatness in front of kings. That is what this verse is talking about. It ain't just talking about, Billy Bob was out there with a hammer and he was just he was working at his job and just hitting his hammer or hitting the job so much. It's more of a focus. It's more of an intimacy with the actual task at hand of skillfulness. And there's so much focus and desire kind of honed in on it that to others, it looks and appears as if what you're doing is seamless. It's easy. It's effortless, right? So I would say this. Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, whatever basketball player you enjoy watching, you'll notice that the one that you like watching versus the other 9 people on the court, it seems like there's one where what they do seems effortless. It kind of goes with the flow of everything, right? That is that skill. And so that skill, when people recognize it subconsciously, it makes people marvel at what they're doing. Okay? That is the skill that Joseph had in all that he was doing. Whether it was him counting sheep or counting some livestock for Potiphar as a slave, he did it as if he was doing it unto the Lord. And so he did it with full intention, with full focus, and to the best quality that he was willing to give. Okay? To the best quality that he was willing to give. And he was willing to go at it day by day, having that same focus. Not in a laborious or dreadful type of yearning. Not that. But as a joyful expectation of good. That Hebrew word for hope. Okay? So, with that being said, the biggest thing to take away is no matter what your weather is right now, know that you have the ability to change your climate. Understand that a large part of changing your climate is based on the atmosphere that you choose to be at. You can change your altitude to increase or get into a higher atmosphere based on your attitude. You can choose to have what the Bible says in the New Testament for hope, the Greek translation, which is a joyful expectation of good. And when you apply that to all things that you do, anything that you touch will be blessed because you will become skillful and diligent at your work and anything that you do with your hands. I hope this has blessed you. I hope this makes sense. And let me know what you think in the comments. And I apologize if this is way too long, but I really hope that this helps someone who needs it the most.